Ancient Greece, a land bathed in sunlight and the echoes of philosophical discourse. From the bustling marketplaces to the serene groves of the academy, the very air hummed with the pursuit of knowledge. This was a society where ideas were currency, where minds like those of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle grappled with the fundamental questions of existence. It was amidst this vibrant intellectual landscape that a new, radical school of thought emerged: Cynicism. Challenging the established norms and values of their time, the Cynics sought happiness not in material possessions or social status, but in a life lived in accordance with nature. They believed that true freedom lay in rejecting the artificial constructs of society and embracing a life of simplicity, self-sufficiency, and virtue. And it was in this unconventional pursuit that one figure would rise to become the embodiment of cynicism itself: Diogenes the Cynic. If you're fascinated by the wisdom of ancient philosophers, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more enlightening content. Diogenes was a man of contradictions, a philosopher who renounced material possessions, yet possessed a sharp wit and an even sharper tongue. He was a social critic who lived on the fringes of society, yet his words and actions resonated with a profound truth that transcended social strata. His life was a living embodiment of his philosophy, a testament to the power of simple living and the pursuit of virtue. Famous for his eccentric behavior, Diogenes was said to have lived in a barrel and wandered the streets of Athens in broad daylight with a lantern, searching for an honest man. His actions, though often perceived as outrageous, were deliberate provocations aimed at exposing the hypocrisy and superficiality of the society around him. He challenged the very foundations of what it meant to be human, urging people to question their values and embrace a simpler, more authentic way of life. The Cynics, it is said, derived their name from the Greek word kynikos, meaning dog-like. This epithet, initially intended as an insult, was embraced by Diogenes and his followers as a badge of honor. They saw in the dog a creature of pure instinct, unburdened by the complexities and hypocrisies of human society. Dogs, Diogenes observed, lived in the present moment, unconcerned with material possessions or social status. They were loyal, honest, and unpretentious qualities he believed were sorely lacking in human beings. By embracing the label of dog, Diogenes challenged societal norms and asserted the inherent dignity of a life lived in accordance with nature. This embrace of the canine extended beyond mere symbolism. Diogenes saw in the dog a model for human behavior, a creature whose simple needs and straightforward nature offered valuable lessons for mankind. He believed that by emulating the dog's honesty, contentment, and lack of pretense, humans could rediscover a more authentic and fulfilling way of life. And so, the figure of Diogenes, the dog philosopher, became an enduring symbol of cynicism. A stark reminder of the importance of challenging societal norms, embracing simplicity, and living a life true to oneself. Diogenes, true to his Cynic philosophy, lived a life stripped bare of material possessions. He believed that true freedom lay not in the accumulation of wealth, but in its utter rejection. His home, if it could be called such, was a simple clay wine jar, a pythos discarded in the marketplace. Here, amidst the bustling commerce of Athens, he found his sanctuary, a testament to his belief that happiness could be found not in luxury, but in the absence of want. His meager possessions were limited to a rough cloak, a begging bowl, and a staff tools for survival, not comfort. He slept under the open sky, finding shelter from the elements in the stoas of Athens or the shade of a cypress tree. Food was whatever he could gather, through begging or foraging, a diet as simple and unadorned as his philosophy. He believed that by minimizing his needs, he maximized his freedom, unshackling himself from the desires that bound others. Diogenes was a creature of the streets. His life lived in the full glare of the Athenian sun. He could be found in the Agora, the heart of the city, engaging in lively debate with anyone who dared to cross his path. His sharp wit and even sharper tongue were legendary, his words like darts aimed at the hypocrisy and folly of his fellow citizens. He spared no one, from the wealthy merchant to the powerful politician, his critiques as cutting as they were insightful. Yet, beneath the rough exterior, there was a depth and complexity to Diogenes that belied his simple lifestyle. He was a keen observer of human nature, his anecdotes and sayings revealing a profound understanding of the human condition. He saw through the masks people wore, exposing their vanities, their insecurities, and their contradictions. He was a mirror held up to society, reflecting back its flaws and urging it to confront its own hypocrisies. His teachings, though often delivered with biting sarcasm, were not without compassion. He saw in the folly of humanity not a reason for despair, but an opportunity for growth. He believed that by confronting their own shortcomings, individuals could break free from the shackles of societal expectations and embrace a more authentic way of life. His was a philosophy of liberation, a call to cast off the weight of convention and embrace the freedom of living in accordance with nature. One of the most enduring aspects of Diogenes' philosophy was his utter disregard for social conventions. He saw these rules and customs, the unspoken codes of conduct that governed Athenian society, as artificial constructs that stifled individuality and hindered personal freedom. He believed that true happiness lay not in conforming to these norms, but in transcending them. His actions often deliberately transgressed these societal boundaries, challenging the very notion of what was considered acceptable behavior. He would eat, sleep, and relieve himself in public, unconcerned by the shocked gasps and disapproving stares of those around him. To Diogenes, these actions were not merely acts of rebellion, but assertions of his own autonomy, a rejection of the artificial constraints imposed by society. This disregard for convention extended to his interactions with the powerful and influential. He was known to have openly mocked Alexander the Great, challenging the very idea of his authority. When asked by the Macedonian king what he desired, Diogenes famously replied, "Stand out of my sunlight." In that simple request, he encapsulated his belief that true freedom lay not in power or possessions, but in the liberty to live according to one's own nature, unhindered by the expectations of others. Diogenes' defiance of social norms was not about anarchy or disrespect. It was about challenging people to question the arbitrary nature of their beliefs and to live more authentically. He believed that true freedom came not from conforming to societal expectations, but from living in accordance with one's own values and principles. Diogenes, the self-proclaimed citizen of the world, rejected the narrow confines of national identity and embraced a broader, more inclusive view of humanity. In an era defined by fierce city-state rivalries and constant warfare, his declaration of cosmopolitanism was a radical departure from the norm. He saw beyond the artificial borders and divisions that separated people, recognizing a shared humanity that transcended geographical boundaries and cultural differences. To Diogenes, the world was not a collection of competing city-states, but a single, interconnected community. He believed that all humans, regardless of their origin or social standing, were bound by a common nature and a shared capacity for reason and virtue. This belief led him to reject the prejudices and biases of his time, embracing instead a philosophy of universal brotherhood and equality. His cosmopolitanism was not merely an intellectual exercise, it was a way of life. He lived as a stranger in his own city, eschewing the privileges and comforts afforded to Athenian citizens. He saw himself as a citizen of the world, owing allegiance to no particular place or people, but to humanity as a whole. This radical perspective challenged the very foundations of the Greek polis, calling into question the exclusionary nature of citizenship and the arbitrary divisions that fueled conflict and division. Diogenes' vision of a world without borders, where individuals were defined not by their place of origin, but by their shared humanity, was centuries ahead of its time. His cosmopolitan ideals, though radical in their day, continue to resonate in the modern world, offering a powerful antidote to the forces of nationalism, tribalism, and xenophobia that threaten to divide us. Central to Diogenes' philosophy was the concept of ascesis, a Greek word often translated as asceticism or training. This practice involved a rigorous self-discipline aimed at cultivating virtue and attaining spiritual freedom. For Diogenes, asceticism was not about self-denial for its own sake, but a means of achieving true happiness by freeing oneself from the tyranny of desire. He believed that by simplifying his life and reducing his needs to the bare minimum, he could achieve a state of inner peace and contentment that eluded those who chased after material wealth and fleeting pleasures. He saw luxury and indulgence not as sources of happiness, but as obstacles on the path to true fulfillment. They were distractions, he argued, that kept people enslaved to their desires, preventing them from attaining genuine freedom. Diogenes' asceticism was a radical departure from the prevailing values of his time. In a society that celebrated wealth, status, and material prosperity, his simple lifestyle and rejection of luxury were seen as eccentric at best and downright subversive at worst. Yet, for Diogenes, this rejection of excess was not a form of deprivation, but a source of liberation. By embracing poverty and simplicity, he believed he could attain a level of spiritual freedom that eluded even the wealthiest and most powerful men in Athens. His teachings on asceticism, though often challenging and unconventional, offer a timeless message about the nature of true happiness. In a world increasingly driven by consumerism and the relentless pursuit of material gain, Diogenes' example reminds us that true fulfillment is found not in what we possess, but in the freedom we find from within. Diogenes possessed a keen eye for hypocrisy and a razor-sharp wit that he wielded mercilessly against those who pretended to be something they were not. He saw through the facades people erected, exposing the vanity, greed, and corruption that lurked beneath the surface of Athenian society. His critiques, often delivered with biting sarcasm and theatrical flair, were aimed at stripping away these pretenses and revealing the naked truth. He reserved his sharpest barbs for those in positions of power and authority. He saw in their pronouncements of wisdom nothing more than empty rhetoric designed to maintain their privileged positions. He challenged their assumptions, questioned their motives, and exposed the contradictions inherent in their beliefs. His aim was not to tear down institutions for the sake of it, but to hold a mirror up to society and reveal its flaws so that they might be addressed. His critiques were not limited to the powerful and elite. He also targeted the common man, challenging their unquestioning acceptance of societal norms and their willingness to conform to the dictates of convention. He saw in their pursuit of wealth, status, and social acceptance a form of voluntary enslavement, a surrender of their individuality to the dictates of the crowd. Diogenes' relentless pursuit of truth, however uncomfortable it might have been for those on the receiving end, served as a vital corrective to the hypocrisies of his time. His willingness to challenge the status quo, to speak truth to power, and to expose the flaws in human nature made him a thorn in the side of the establishment, but also a powerful voice for authenticity and self-awareness. In the tapestry of ancient Greek philosophy, Diogenes stands out as a figure of paradox and provocation. His radical embrace of simplicity, his rejection of societal norms, and his relentless pursuit of truth challenged the very foundations of Athenian society. He lived his philosophy, embodying its principles in every aspect of his life, from his choice of dwelling to his interactions with the most powerful men of his time. His life, though seemingly unconventional and austere, was in many ways a celebration of freedom. The freedom to live in accordance with nature, to think for oneself, and to challenge the artificial constructs that bind us. He saw in simplicity not a form of deprivation, but a path to liberation, a way of life that freed the mind from the shackles of desire and allowed the spirit to soar. Diogenes' legacy extends far beyond the dusty streets of ancient Athens. His teachings on self-sufficiency, his critiques of societal hypocrisy, and his unwavering belief in the power of simple living continue to resonate with those seeking a more authentic and meaningful existence. In a world grappling with the complexities of modern life, his message of simplicity offers a refreshing antidote to the excesses of consumerism and the relentless pursuit of material gain. His was a life lived in pursuit of truth, a testament to the transformative power of self-discovery, and a timeless reminder that true happiness is found not in the accumulation of possessions, but in the freedom to live in accordance with our own nature.